the horror. Who dares disturb the sanctity of Dracula? Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Erschen. This week we're doing another movie review. This is Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, otherwise known as the Seven Brothers Meet Dracula. Which that might be a more appropriate title, this being the final film in the Hammer Dracula series. But then again, it doesn't speak to the collaboration of Hammer Films and Shaw Brothers Studios. In that sense, I think The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires is a more appropriate title. And that kind of sounds like an old 70s kung fu movie, doesn't it? So yeah, very, very interesting film. I think a lot of people might have been disappointed this being the final film in the Hammer Dracula series, and the fact that Christopher Lee did not return as Dracula for one last go-round with Van Helsing. But Peter Cushing does return, of course, and Dracula is in this film, as played by John Forbes-Robertson, who I think does a solid job, no doubt, but I feel like if Christopher Lee had just come back for that 10 minutes of screen time, I think he would have just killed it. Not to mention the fact that in that opening scene, he probably has more dialogue than in the entire Hammer Dracula franchise. But nonetheless, it's kind of disappointing from that sense, but I have to say this film is much more entertaining than it has any right to be. On the surface, you might think that's absolutely ridiculous to bring together the kung fu genre with the horror genre, but you'd be surprised how well it works, you know. And even though this is my personal least favorite of the series, it's still damn fun, you know. It's really, really fun. It's a good time in the cinema, for sure. And this film came out in 1974 and was directed by Roy Ward Baker, as well as Cheh, who does a lot of the scenes. He directs a lot of the scenes with the martial arts and the kung fu stuff. So it's kind of collaboration between the directors as well. Of course, the film stars the legendary Peter Cushing returning as Professor Van Helsing, and you gotta give it to him, man. He gives it 110%, no matter how ridiculous the movie might be, or how ridiculous the premise might be, and this is kind of ridiculous, but the film stars David Chang as Cheng, Julie Edge as Vanessa Buren, and Robin Stewart as Leyland Van Helsing. Yes, Van Helsing has a son in this movie that we never heard about up until now in the series. So yeah, it doesn't have the greatest continuity with the rest of the Hammer Dracula series, but this is the final film, and I have to say it has to count, because Count Dracula is in it, and Van Helsing is in it, so it has to count. And then we do get a final battle at the end, you know, between Van Helsing and Dracula, in his full form. So what happens in the film is, we open in Transylvania, where we see this Taoist Buddhist monk kind of climbing this mountain, you know, for miles up, and his name is Ka. And apparently he's the high priest of the Temple of the Seven Golden Vampires. And he seeks the help of Count Dracula. Why? Because the vampires have basically gone to sleep. They've lost their power. And Ka is basically their leader, you know. So he needs Dracula's help to kind of get that power back and, you know, that leadership back. and to be able to just rule over the village, you know, with an iron fist with the 7 golden vampires. So Dracula is apprehensive about him at first, but then he thinks about it for a minute. He's like, you know, I am stuck in this castle, I can't leave. Which, I don't know why he can't leave. I mean, the monk guy just walked right in the castle. Why can't Dracula walk out of the castle? At least at nighttime, anyway. But anyway, I digress. So he feels, you know, since he's trapped in that castle, and he wants to walk free, and he wants to roam the earth in reign of terror as usual, he decides to possess the body of Ka. So yes, Dracula possesses the monk Ka, you know, and Ka basically is Dracula running around, and he's going to return to the temple and resurrect the 7 golden vampires. And next we see Professor Van Helsing, the legendary Van Helsing, who is famous, world famous for his battles with Dracula and the undead. And he's bringing his wealth of knowledge to the University of Chongqing in China. And he's having a seminar basically about old Chinese vampire legends. And he tells this story about this, about the 7 golden vampires and how they were holding a ritual where they were going to sacrifice 7, yes, count them, 7 young women. And what happens is the farmer, one of them is the farmer's wife, so the farmer breaks in and tries to rescue his damsel in distress. The 7 vampires catch him, and they stab the woman and kill her, and they basically surround the man, but the man does end up grabbing hold of the medallion that was around one of the vampires' necks. And it's like this huge, like, bat, basically, this medallion of a bat. And he hangs it up on the statue of the Buddha, so it's like, oh, this, like, holy thing now, this holy statue and this ultimate evil clashing. So all the vampires gather around, and they slice the man's throat and kill him. And then the vampire goes to get his medallion back, and his hand bursts, and he just bursts into flame, you know, and dies, you know. So now there's only 6 vampires left. So another thing I thought was really cool is when the vampires resurrect their past victims, and you see them rise from their graves, you know, like zombies, you know. They're basically like legions of the undead. And yeah, great scene, great atmosphere and tension, great horror there, great direction by Roy Ward Baker when you see them rise from the grave, and they turn around and they're like these skulls. Some scenes, when you see the zombies, they look a little bit hokey. It looks like they're just wearing skull masks, you know. But again, you know, it's a very low-budget film, you know. This is Hammer when they were kind of running low on funds, you know. They were dwindling. And some of the scenes when you see the zombies, it looks like they're doing, I don't know if they're doing a little dance or they're doing a little jig or something. They're like, what are they doing? What are these zombies doing? They're dancing like the Thriller video or something. We then meet a young man by the name of Cheng, and he was one of the students at the seminar in the university. And he's very intrigued by Van Helsing. He's heard all about him. He knows all the stories about his legendary battles with Dracula. So he enlists the help of Van Helsing. And he tells Van Helsing that the young farmer in the story was actually his grandfather. And he enlists the help of Van Helsing to take on the 6 remaining golden vampires and take them out before they can get that medallion, that golden medallion, which is in his possession. don't know how he got it, but somehow he got hold of the golden medallion of the bat, the vampire bat. And with that, apparently, because the medallion apparently has their life force inside it, you know, and the vampires can use that to resurrect him once again, and then they'll have the full 7 golden vampires. So, yeah. So they decide to go on a trek to that village where the temple is located with the vampires. And they meet up with a woman who is a very wealthy young widow who is intrigued with Van Helsing, who basically has nothing else to do with her money, so she decides she is going to fund this expedition. It's this long journey to go take down and hunt down the vampires, because she wants the thrill. She's bored and she needs something exciting to do, so she goes on this trek with them. And the son as well, of course, Leyland Van Helsing, played by Robin Stewart in the film, he's kind of a forgettable character, really. I mean, but yes, Vanessa is quite beautiful, as well as being very wealthy, you know. She's actually gorgeous. But she kind of, you might think at first that she might kind of strike a romance with Leyland Van Helsing, the son. But she seems more intrigued with the father than with him. She just thinks he's kind of boring. But she does kind of strike up a little romance with David Chang's character, Cheng. Yeah, I will say that the fight scenes in this are very well done, very well choreographed, very well filmed, and great job direction by Cheh with those scenes, because it's classic kung fu in a lot of ways. So you might ask yourself, you know, how are they going to do this? Just Chang and Van Helsing and the son and the wealthy widow Vanessa. But no, he actually has 6 brothers who are masters of kung fu. So together they are the 7 brothers that meet Dracula or whatever. They don't get to meet Dracula really, but that's funny. There's a lot of 7s in this movie. You got the 7 vampires, you got the 7 women that were being sacrificed, you got the 7 brothers that are going to take on the vampires. But there is 1 sister, so it's 7 brothers and 1 sister, Mei Ling, I think her name was. She's a badass too. There is one great scene where they're on the way, they're in the horse and carriages, and they're on the way trekking through the mountains, and there's like 100 dudes that pop up out of the ground out of nowhere, and it's like, who the hell are these guys? They're just dressed in black. Like, do they work for the vampires? Or I don't know, but they're just bad dudes, and they just take on it's like almost an excuse to get a wild kung fu battle scene in there, but it's awesome, you know. You got this one scene is really cool where you see all the 7 brothers one by one. One's got the battle axes, one's got the bow and arrow, and the girl has the knives, and one dude has the battle axes, you know. It's pretty awesome. And yeah, we get some great bloody battles, and this movie doesn't skimp on the violence and the gore either. There's plenty of blood and gore, there's plenty of nudity. So yeah, it's got all that great stuff too. And yes, once they do get to where they need to be, they end up, even Peter Cushing gets on the action. We see him fighting throughout the movie too. Torches, taking on the vampires with the fire and burning them. So man, the old man's got some spunk left in him still. He's something else. And of course the son gets in on the action too. Usually he's either using a gun or just his bare fists, but he doesn't really know crap about kung fu. But Chang is a badass. You know, all the other brothers seem like almost like amateurs compared to him. You can tell he's the master. You know, he moves really. He's got a great flow of great style, very masterful. So yeah, whenever the spotlight's on him, you're like, yeah. Because at the time, I guess the Shaw brothers were kind of building him up to almost be like the next Bruce Lee, I guess. Yeah, so a lot of people were kind of built up to be the next Bruce Lee. It didn't. I mean, he did have some success for sure, but not quite to that level. I'd say if there was a successor to Bruce Lee, it was Jackie Chan, you know, who was coming up at that time too. But at any rate, I love the kung fu scenes, and you would never think that this would work so well, but the two genres work very well together, and Hammer does a great job, and the Shaw brothers do a great job. It's a great combination of the both, you know, and it's good in both ways. You get great horror, and you get great kung fu, and it's just a beautiful thing, you know. Who would think that it would work? And it just sounds so ridiculous, but somehow it works. But I'd say maybe if you're a fan of the Hammer Dracula series, if you're just a fan of that, you might be a little disappointed where, you know, it's not Christopher Lee returning as Dracula, you know, that might... But you've got Peter Cushing killing it as Van Helsing once again, so that part you gotta be happy with, because he's always 110% committed to every role he does, no matter what, especially when it comes to Van Helsing. He does a fantastic job, as always. And you might find the final act a little bit disappointing as well. You know, when we do get the final battle, it's a little bit lackluster, I have to say. I wish there had been a little bit more of a struggle, you know. But at any rate, the film is an absolute blast from start to finish. It does seem a little bit hokey at times. Maybe it doesn't have the greatest makeup effects. You can tell it's a little bit of a cheaper budget at times, but beautifully directed, beautifully shot by Roy Ward Baker. He does a great job, as does Chang Cheh. So yeah, it's got a great score there. Very reminiscent to Horror of Dracula, I would say, by James Bernard, but still great nonetheless. It's classic Hammer meets classic 70s Kung Fu. I mean, what more could you ask for? Alright guys, I give The Legend of the Golden Vampires 2 devil horns up, and thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared. Good evening, folks, and we got some brand new merchandise for you over at www.thehorrorcona.com, and that's C-O-N-A.com. Representing the Horror Corner. Great new design. We got the Morbid Hour live stream there, you got the Horror Hangout live stream there, and you got my nemesis, the Dark Fate. So grab your t-shirt over at www.thehorrorcona.com. And we also got this beautiful new mug. Look at that. Very, very cool. Thought that came out really nice. So grab your merchandise today over at www.thehorrorcona.com.